Hey guys, Jason here and welcome to the Abyss Garage. In today's video, we are talking about motorcycle stands, jacks, and lift tables, and what you guys need to know if you are looking to maintain and repair your bikes and make your life a whole lot easier working on them. Now, with that being said, I really wasn't even thinking about doing a video on this stuff, except on one of my other videos, I had someone, a viewer and a content creator, Hippie's Chopper Corner. I probably screwed that up, but we've been going back and forth, and he actually commented asking what lift table I was using, and I gave a response, and I probably could have made it like a 1.5 mile long comment back to him, but I figured, you know what, it'd be better if I went in depth, particularly on the Pittsburgh 1,000-pound lift table sold by Harbor Freight. I really have, I think, some really important information for you guys out there on that. And while I was thinking about that, I was like, you know what? I'll actually go over and cover some other lift setups that I've used over the past years. I probably have about a little over 20 years of working on motorcycles, and I would say 10 plus years of using a lift of some sorts on a regular basis. So I feel comfortable with giving you guys this information here, and hopefully it'll help you if you're trying to figure out what's the best setup for you. So let's get to it. So first thing is first, we're going to be talking about motorcycle stands. Primarily, this I would say is for dirt bikes. And while today's video is based on, I would say, any type of motorcycle, we are not brand specific. The stand itself, if you're using a lighter bike, stands work out great for you. I've also seen previously people will build choppers on basically a stand like this, except it's extremely higher up, probably say about here. So you're at a good height to work on the bike. Now, with that being said, the one thing I don't understand with those is that you have to have like 2 people or 3 people help you take them down once you're done building the bike. So to me, if you're, say like me, where you're pretty much by yourself, that's really not an option for you. But the stand itself is a good alternative. I actually have another stand that's an aluminum version that's actually taller than this one. This one is from Harbor Freight as well, and it sits down a little bit lower. So, there's always different ways you can go. Sometimes the taller one's nicer if you have to do something different, but this one works well for this particular bike. So like I said, I figure I'll go over this one. I know it's really self-explanatory, but this does serve a purpose. All right, guys, so now we're on to, I guess, the second piece. And now this is the Craftsman ATV motorcycle floor jack itself. And this thing is awesome. I've used this, I can't even tell you how many times. The channel's really new, and I've used it on probably like 4 or 5 different bikes by now. So this thing comes in handy all the time. This was my first lift that I bought. So with that being said, these are great. Like I said, the nice thing, we'll start off with number 1. It's small, it's compact. When you're not using it, you can just stand it upright in a corner of the garage and forget about it, especially if you're a guy that is limited on space, which is this is always a plus. Now, I've had this for quite some time, and it does need a little maintenance, but I think that's with anything. And I had my choice of going with a Harbor Freight version. I decided at the time to go with the Craftsman, and so I went with this one. This is a steel unit. I wanted a heavier piece because one thing I will say is, if you think about it, the footprint on this is relatively small, and you have a much longer bike. So now You definitely should strap this down. I just have this here for demonstration purposes, really. But it has, I guess you would say, like D-ring areas to hook a tie down to and then secure the bike. And it also has 3 different lock positions. But again, like I said earlier, a few seconds ago, the bike, any bike itself, it doesn't really matter what kind it is, it will teeter, so you have to keep that in mind. But overall, this thing works great. You do tires on it, you take the rims off. If you have to take the forks off for whatever reason, this is the lift. And to be honest with you, you could probably do the majority of work you need to have done or you need to do with one of these lifts. So this is a great piece if you're starting out or if you just want to add on. And the other thing I'll say, which is great about this, is I've used this ATV lift for other things besides motorcycle stuff. It works great if you're taking a transmission in and out of a car on the ground. I've used it on 2 different vehicles, and it works great with the wheels. It allows you to roll it around and not kill yourself. So this is a great choice. All right, guys, so we're going to talk about another lift table that I have used in the past, which I do not have in the garage, so I can't show you. And I would say that's a professional style lift table itself. You've seen them on TV shows all the time. They use them for ATVs, again, or like lawn tractors and motorcycles. And it's a really wide unit itself that isn't necessarily so mobile. And there's probably more negatives, I would say, towards them with that lift, in my opinion, rather than positives. So the first thing I do not care for on those is they are air operated. You really pretty much, I would say, on a motorcycle, if you're just doing maintenance and whatnot, you probably pretty much don't really need air. If you have a really strong electric impact, whether it's corded or cordless, it could get the job done for you. So having an airline run to the foot pedal itself, to me, is a pain. It's like a nuisance. I hate to say it, it's like a tripping hazard, in my opinion, if you're walking around. And on top of it, I would feel like probably most of us don't have like a dedicated line to run to the lift, so you're constantly unplugging the airline and plugging it back in, as stupid as that sounds. And so that's like one thing one of the first things I don't like about them. The second thing is they are wide, and even when you take the sides off for, like, say, an ATV, the lift itself is wider than, I would say, the Pittsburgh lift that I'm using to build this chopper on. And even a few inches, like, I've noticed that your lower back will get sore because now you're leaning over and trying to work on the bike, whereas now the bike, the lift itself is narrower. I'm able to get closer to it, and it's definitely one of those things you really don't think about, but it's definitely a comfort issue. The one thing I will say that I do like about them is they have many lift positions or lock positions, so you're able to set the lift table itself in multiple different heights if you're working on something, which is always a plus. But it has its purpose too. I would say that if you had trikes or a sidecar or something like that where it's a wider piece, then that would definitely be a great lift choice. But for what I'm doing, it's something that I would probably steer away from. All right, guys, so if you have stuck around long enough, I really appreciate it. And now I would say is really the whole reason behind this video is the Pittsburgh lift table from Harbor Freight. And like I said, I really want to give you guys some, I think, valuable information on it. And this is not my first lift table, this Pittsburgh. I had one previously, and it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I'm going to leave price out of this because I can't really compare the price of the lift table from almost 10 years ago to now, although I will say it got dumb expensive, but that's, again, I can't compare that. But lift tables, this Harbor Freight lift table is not the same. There is a ton of differences. And the previous one, like I had mentioned, I loved. It was one of those products where it's something that you're not sponsored by, but you totally enjoy it so much that you will tell everyone about how great it is and whatnot. And if you're into motorcycles, you have to have one. So it's one of those products you really get behind. And so if anyone's purchased from Harbor Freight before, I do not understand why they will have, to me, the same product listed in like a flyer or something with two different SKUs or item numbers. And I've had this problem before, and it's driven me nuts. And this lift table was the same thing. So we're going to start off with the differences, the key differences. And if you guys are looking, and you might even want to look online for a used one to pick up to save yourself some money, or in my opinion, get the better lift than this one. All right, so the first thing you'll notice the difference on with this lift table, or at least from what I noticed, was the place of the pedals for the pump, for the to pump and release. Now, my older unit itself, it was located further up. And the beauty of that was that they both were they would just slide on. So the pump and release were both similar to this, not the same exact design, but similar, where it was simple. You would just jack up the bike and then put it on the lock itself, and then you would just simply, I would take both of these off and you would be good. The problem I have with this one is the release itself. For some reason, they decided to use round bar, and they use like a dimple and a bolt to lock it in. So I hate how high this release is. It's almost vertical, and it's kind of like a hazard in itself if you're walking around it and you're not paying attention. The other problem is I tried to actually clock it into a different position so it was lower. And the problem that you have with that is if you clock it downwards to try and get it out of the way so you don't just kill your shins, is that the lift itself won't go down. So that is, in my opinion, a really big negative. One of the easiest ways to tell the difference between, I guess, the older style and the newer style. And with that being said, because I get sidetracked really easy, when I purchased this lift, what kills me is the sticker of the picture of the lift on the package itself was of the older style, not of this one. So I was assuming that I was getting the older version. Another thing is here, and I know the lift's a mess because it's getting used, but the old unit itself had the access panel for it was a lot different. The other one itself I thought had a thicker material, more closer to this, or maybe even the same material, diamond plate, and it overlapped onto the lift table, and it had like box tubing welded on the back side of it here and kept it locked in place. I don't know why they changed it. This is more like a flush style setup. As you can see, it sits much flatter. But to be honest with you, I don't understand the benefits of this. The other thing is that I don't like is obviously the bike's on it, but it's got, it's hard to tell, but it has some play, like it's almost warped in a sense, and I don't care for that at all. It's one of those things where they should have just left it alone. Those are two things that I don't care for. Another thing is, now this is like with any of the lifts themselves, what I ended up doing was upgrading the wheel chalk, which if you do get a lift like this, I recommend this style. It makes your life a lot easier. And what I did was I moved it further forward. So if you see here, this tire actually sticks out past the lift. Now, if you're building a long bike, you're going to need that, because if you imagine this bike's not that long, and if you have it set back further, that wheel chalk, you're going to be getting close towards the edge, the end rather, and on top of it, if you're building a bike that has an extended front end or anything like that, it's going to get worse, or if it has rake, it's going to push it out more. So that's a nice thing to do, is move that all the way forward. Now, another thing I don't care for, and it was a real simple fix, was these are the factory holes here for this U-bolt to go into hold for the tie down. Now it makes a wonderful spot now to hold T-handles or screwdrivers, but when you have when you have the U-bolt there itself, the tie down is almost vertical, and you're pulling the bike maybe necessarily down, but you're not pulling it forward and locking it in. So when you have it back there, what happens is you can still rock the bike back and forth, which I'm not a big fan of. So if you, by moving the D-ring or the U-bolt itself up here to the front, now I've put this on an angle, and it's very close to the rake of the bike itself. So we're now pulling this down tight, and this bike is secure. Obviously, you can crank it down further, but it's not going anywhere. It's not going to rock forward and backward on you. All right, so here is probably one of the last things about this newer style Pittsburgh lift table that I do not like. I am not sure if you would say that this was built on a Friday afternoon or whatever the case is, how that expression goes. And I don't know if this was just thrown together at the last second or whatnot with the build quality itself. But I didn't have this problem with the last lift. It's not really necessarily level. And I'm going to show you that with the digital angle finder here. So I'm going to show you how it sits now, and then I'm going to show you jacking it up, the difference. So granted, this isn't a fabrication welding table like a Certiflat where it has to be perfect, but it is a pain, honestly, when you have it setting in a certain position and then you jack it up and then it's changed. So I know that's a really minute thing, but it's definitely a big thing in my opinion. And as you can see here with my digital angle finder, that this concrete is sloped at 0.4 degrees that way, which would make sense because my drain's over there. So that's just a good starting point here. And now I do understand it's diamond plate, so there could be a discrepancy of a little bit, but you're sitting at 1.5 degrees. So it is basically a full degree off. And you can see here, it's maybe hard to tell, but the way I have the bike ratchet strapped down, it's pulling that way. So now what I'm going to do here is jack it up and see how much it changes. All right, so I have this now jacked up, not fully up, but if you look, we're sitting at 2.5 degrees. So now we're another degree facing that way. So if you think about it, we are 0.4 on the floor and 2.5. So you're literally 2 degrees off. And that to me is really frustrating. Again, back to the whole, maybe it was built on a Friday afternoon. But if you look now, the bike is more upright. So when you let it down, it tilts. And I don't know as to why that does that, but I'm not a big fan of it. And with that being said, that's what I have for today's video. I wanted to, like I said, give you guys a detailed explanation. You know, the problem I'll say with this is, again, I wasn't really trying to compare price point. You can find the older style lifts on Marketplace, you know, but I feel like I guess I understand why, but I don't really understand why these lift tables are so expensive. I think what happens is, just like with anything, you'll get somebody, one or two guys that will price something up too high, and then what happens is everyone else says, well, they're asking that much for it, I can get that much. So, you know, where a lift table should be X amount of dollars, now we are timesing that by 2 or almost 3 times the amount of what I think it should be, in my opinion. So one of the things was, I decided at that point I wasn't going to spend that much money on a used unit that I had no idea about. So I went and bought a new one. But if you guys are, like I said, looking for a lift and thinking about getting a lift table like this, the Pittsburgh one, I would highly recommend looking for a used one on Marketplace. So that way, obviously, you can go check it out and see if it's the older style. Now, you may have watched this video and said, well, I really don't care what you just said, because all that stuff you've gone over is really negligible to me, and I don't care. But for me, I think it was, I feel strong enough that I wanted to make a video about it. So that's all I have for today's video, guys. Hopefully you learned something of it, and you know, the different styles between the stands, the jacks, and the table itself. And hopefully in the next video, it'll be back onto the shovelhead project, so we can keep moving along forward with that. Until then, guys, take care, and I'll see you around for the next video.